Sketches in Bath Chapter 2. 312 tilde. Well-known characters in the pump room taking a sip with king-blatted free sketches of fair game the awkward rencontre, or Mr. B and Miss L public bathing, or stewing a live sober thoughts Milsom Street swelza, visit to the pig and whistle, Avon Street of the Buff Club. To the pump room we went, where the grave and the gay and the aged and the sickly lounge time away, where all the choice spirits are seen making free with the sovereign cordial, the true eau de vie. The déjeuner over, the first place to which the stranger in Bath is most desirous of an introduction is the pump room. Not that he anticipates restoration to health from drinking the waters, or imagines the virtues of immortality are to be found by immersion in the baths, but if he be a person of any condition, he is naturally anxious to show off make his bow to the gay throng, and, at the same time, elucidate the exact condition of Bath society. If, however, he is a mere plebeian in search of novelty, coupling pleasure with business, or an invalid sent here by his doctors to end his days, he is still anxious, while life remains, to see and be seen, to observe whom he can recognize among the great folks he has known in the metropolis, or perchance meet consolation from some suffering fellow citizen, who, like himself, has been conveyed to Bath to save his family the misery of seeing him expire beneath his own roof. What an admirable variety of character does this scene present, said Transit, who, on our first 313 entrance, was much struck with the magnificence of the rooms, and still more delighted with the immense display of eccentricities which presented themselves. I must introduce you, old fellow, said Eglantine, to a few of the oddities who figure here. The strange-looking personage in the right-hand corner is usually called Dick Solus, from his almost invariably appearing abroad by himself, or dangling after the steps of some fair thespian, to the single of whom he is a very constant tormentor. Mrs. Egan of the theatre, who knows what's what, has christened him Mr. Dilatuch, while the heroes of the sock and buskin as invariably describe him by the appellation of Shake. From an unpleasant action he has both in walking and sitting. The sour-visaged gentleman at this moment in conversation with him is the renowned Peter Paul Pallet, Esquire, otherwise the Reverend Mr. M. Behind them appears a celebrated dentist and his son, who has attained the rank of M.D., both well known here by the titles of the Grand Duke of Tuscany and Count Puntusqui, a pair of worthies always on the lookout for business, and hence very constant attendants at the promenade in the pump room. The old gentleman in the chintz morning gown hobbling along on crutches from the gout is a retired vinegar merchant, the father of a Chancery MP, of whom the Bath wags say that when in business he must always have carried a sample of his best vinegar in his face. At this moment, old Blackstrap advanced and requested permission to introduce to our notice Jack Physic, an honest lawyer, and, as he said, one of the cleverest fellows and best companions in Bath. Jack had the good fortune to marry one of the prettiest and most attractive actresses that ever appeared upon the Bath stage, Miss Jamison, upon which occasion the wag circulated many pleasant Jew disprets on the union of love, law, and physic. The arrival of a very pompous gentleman, who appeared to 314 excite general observation, gave my friend Eglantine an opportunity of relating an anecdote of the eccentric, who figures in Pulteney Street under the cognomen of the Bath Bashaw. There, said Horace, you may see him every morning decorated in his flannel robe de chamber and green velvet cap, seated outside in his balcony, smoking an immensely large German pipe and sending forth clouds of fragrant perfume, which are pleasantly wafted right or left as the wind blows along the breakfast tables of his adjoining neighbors. This eccentric was originally a foundling discovered on the steps of a door in Rath, and named by the parochial officers, Parish. By great perseverance and good fortune he became a Hambro merchant, and in process of time realized a handsome property, which, much to his honor and credit, he retired to spend a portion of among the inhabitants of this city, thus paying a debt of gratitude to those who had protected him in infancy when he was abandoned by his unnatural parents. The little fellow yonder with a military air and no want of self-conceit is a field officer of the Bath Volunteers, Adjutant Captain O'Donnell, a descendant from the mighty King Brian Barrock, And, as we say at Eton, no small beer man, I assure you. Who is that gigantic fellow just entering the rooms? Said Hartley. That is Long Heavisides, replied Eglantine, whom handsome Jack and 2 or 3 more of the Bathwits have christened, in derision, Mr. Lightsides, a right pleasant fellow, quite equal in intellect and good humor to the altitude of his person, which, I am told, measures full 6 feet 6. Gentlemen, said the facetious Blackstrap, here comes an old lady who has paid dearly for a bit of the brown, lately the relict of the late Admiral M. Dougal, and now fresh at 70, the blooming wife of a young spark who has just attained the years of discretion, at least, as far as regards 315 pecuniary affairs. For before leading the old lady into church, she very handsomely settled 3,000 per annum upon her Adonis, as some little compensation to his feelings, for the rude jests and jeers he was doomed to bear with from his boon companions. Eyes right, lads, said Eglantine. The tall stout gentleman in a blue surtout and white trousers is General B. Pshaw. Never mind his name, said Hartley. What are his peculiarities? Why, imprimis, he has a lovely young female commander-in-chief by his side is a great reader with a very little memory. A very good story is told of him, that I fear might be applied with equal justice to many other great readers. Namely, that some wags having at different times altered the title page, and pasted together various leaves of a popular Scotch novel, they thus successfully imposed upon the general the task of reading the same matter 3 times over, by this means creating in his mind an impression, not very far from the truth, that all the works of the great unknown bore a very close similitude to each other. An opinion which the general is said to maintain very strenuously unto this hour. Of all the characters in the busy scene of life which can excite a pleasurable sensation in the close observer of men and manners, is your gay ancient, whether male or female, the sprightly evergreens of society, whose buoyant spirits outlive the fiery course of youth, while their playful leafage buds forth in advanced life with all the freshness, fragrance, and vigor of the more youthful plants. Such, said Eglantine, is the old beau yonder, my friend Curtis, who is here quaintly denominated the Everlasting. The jolly bacchanalian, who accompanies him in his morning's lounge, is Charles Davis, a right jolly fellow, universally respected, although, it must be admitted, he is a party man, since in a 316 show of hands, Charles must always, unfortunately, be on one side. A promenade up and down the room, and a visit to the goddess Hygia, for such, I suppose, the ancient matron who dispenses the healing draught must be designated, gave us an opportunity of observing the fresh arrivals, among whom we had the pleasure to meet with an old naval officer, known to Hartley, a victim to the gout, wheeled about in a chair, expecting, to use his own sea phrase, to go to pieces every minute, but yet full of spirits as an admiral's grog bottle. As fond of a good joke as a fresh-caught reefer, and as entertaining as the surgeon's mate or the chaplain of the fleet. I say, Master Heafley, said the captain, the frigate yonder with the brown breastworks, and she with the pink facings, look something like privateers. My forelights, Master Hartley, but if I had the use of my underworks, I should be for firing a little grape shot across their quarters to see if I could not bring them into action. And I will answer for it, they would not show any objection to lie alongside of you, Captain, said Eglantine, while you had got a shot left in your locker. Mere Cyprian traders, Captain from the Gulf of Venus, engaged in gudgeon balling or on the lookout for flat fish. The little craft with the black top is called the Throgmorton, and the one alongside the Ormsby of Berkeley is the Pretty Lacy, a prime frigate and quite new in the service. If you have a mind to sail up the Straits of Cytherea, Captain, I can answer for it we shall fall in with a whole fleet of these light vessels, the Two Sisters, the Emerys, the yawl Thompson, that lively little cutter Jackson, the transports King and Hill, the lugger Lewis, and the country ship, the Lady Grosvenor, all well found and ready for service and only waiting to be well manned. A good story is just now afloat about the Lacy, who, being recently taken up for private trade by Commodore Bowen, was 317 discovered to be sailing under false colors. It appears that during the commander's absence a dashing enemy, the captain of the Hussar, a man of war, had entered the cabin privately, and having satisfied himself of the state of the vessel, took an opportunity to overhaul the ship's stores, when drinking rather freely of some choice love age, a cordial kept expressly for the Commodore's own use, he was unexpectedly surprised by the return of the old commander on board. And in making his escape through the cabin window into a boat he had in waiting, unfortunately left his timepiece and topmast behind. This circumstance is said to have put the Commodore out of conceit with his little frigate, who has since been paid off, and is now chartered for general purposes. At this little episode of a well-known Bath story, the captain laughed heartily, and Transit was so much amused thereat, that on coming in contact with the Commodore and the captain in our perambulations, he furnished the accompanying sketch of that very ludicrous scene, under the head of The Bath Beau and Frail Belle, or Mr. B and Miss L. An excellent band of music, which continues to play from 1 to 3:30 every day during the season, greatly increases the attraction to the rooms, and also adds much to the cheerfulness and gaiety of the scene. We had now nearly exhausted our materials for observation, and having, to use Transit's phrase, booked everything worthy of note, taken each of us a glass of the Bath water, although I confess not swallowing it without some qualmish apprehensions from the recollection of the 4 lines in Anstey's Bath Guide. They say it is right that for every glass, a tune you should take that the water may pass. So, while little Tabby was washing her rump, the ladies kept drinking it out of the pump. A very pleasant piece of satire, but somewhat, as I understand, at the expense of truth, since the well from which the water in the pump room is obtained is many feet below the one that supplies the baths. Situation certainly assists the view of the satirist. I ought not to pass over here the story told us by our old friend Blackstrap, respecting the first discovery of these waters by Bladud, the son of Lud Hudibras, king of Britain. A fabulous tale, which, for the benefit of the city, all true Bathonians are taught to lisp with their hornbook, and believe with their creed as genuine orthodox, and on which subject my friend Horace furnished the following impromptu. O Lud, that hogs and mud one should rival sage MDs, and hot water in this quarter cure each foul disease. Throw physic to the dogs, I'll have none on't, said Horace. If hot water can effect such wonders, why, a plague on all the doctors. Let a man be content to distill his medicine fresh from his own tea kettle, or make his washing copper serve the double purpose for domestic uses and a medicated bath. But what is surprising, no mortal e'er any one of the physical gentlemen stewed. From the day that King Bladud first found out these bogs, and thought them so good for himself and his hogs, not one of the faculty ever has tried these excellent waters to cure his own hide, though many a skillful and learned physician, with candor, good sense, and profound erudition, obliges the world with the fruits of his brain, their nature and hidden effects to explain. 1. The fabulous account alluded to in Warner's History of Bath, where Bladud is represented to have discovered the properties of the warm springs at Beechin Wood, Swanswick, by observing the hogs to wallow in the mud that was impregnated therewith, and thus to have derived the knowledge of a cure for T.'s leprous affection. But Allen's, lads, said Horace, we are here to follow the fashion and indulge in all the eccentricities of the place, to note the follies of the time and depict the chief actors, without making any personal sacrifice to correct the evil. Our satire will do more to remove old prejudices when it appears in print, aided by Bob Transit's pencil, than all our reasonings upon the spot can hope to effect, although we followed Mr. M. Culloch's economy, and lectured upon decency from break of day to setting sun. In quitting the pump room we must not, however, omit to notice the statue of Beau Nash, before which Transit appears, in propria persona, sketching off the marble memento, without condescending to notice the busts of Pope and Newton, which fill situations on each side. A circumstance which in other times produced the following epigram from the pen of the witty Earl of Chesterfield. The statue plaque the busts between adds satire to the strength, wisdom and wit are little seen, but folly at full length. Such is the attachment of man to the recollections of anything associated with pleasure, that it is questionable if the memory of old Joe Miller is not held in higher estimation by the moderns than that of Father Luther, the Reformer. And while the numerous amusing anecdotes in circulation tend to keep alive the fame of Nash, it is not surprising that the merry pay court to his statue, being in his own dominions, before they bow at the classic shrine of Pope, or bend in awful admiration beneath the bust of the greatest of philosophers. 'Twas said of old, deny it now who can, the only laughing animal is man. And we are about to present the reader with a right merry scene. One, too, if he has any fun in his composition, or loves a good joke, must warm the cockles tilde 320 tilde tilde of his heart. Who would ever have thought, in these moralizing times, when the Puritans are raising conventicles in every town and village, and the cant of vice societies has spread itself over the land, that in one of our most celebrated places of fashionable resort, there should be found baths where the young and the old, the beauteous female and the gay spark, are all indiscriminately permitted to enjoy the luxurious pleasure together. That such is the case in Bath no one who has recently participated in the pleasures of immersion will dispute, and in order to perpetuate that gratification, Bob Transit has here faithfully delineated the scene which occurred upon our entering the King's Bath. Through the opening from the Queen's, where, to our great amusement and delight, we found ourselves surrounded by many a sportive nymph, whose beauteous form was partially hidden by the loose flannel gown. It is true. But now and then, the action of the water, produced by the continued movements of a number of persons all bathing at the same time, discovered charms, the which to have caught a glimpse of in any other situation might have proved of dangerous consequences to the fair possessors. The baths, it must be admitted, are delightful, both from their great extent and their peculiar properties, as, on entering from the Queen's Bath, you may enjoy the water at from 90 to 96 degrees, or requiring more heat have only to walk forward, through the archway, to obtain a temperature of 116. The first appearance of old Blackstrap's visage floating along the surface of the water, like the grog-blossomed trunk of the ancient Bardolph, bound up in a Welsh wig, was truly ludicrous, and produced such an unexpected burst of laughter from my merry companions, that I feared some of the fair naiads would have fainted in the waters from fright, and then heaven help them, for decency would have prevented our rushing to their assistance. The notices to prevent gentlemen tilde 321 tilde tilde from swimming in the baths are, in my opinion, so many inducements or suggestions for every young visitor to attempt it. Among our mad wags, Horace Eglantine was more than once remonstrated with by the old bathing women for indulging in this pleasure, to the great alarm of the ladies, who, crowding together in one corner with their aged attendants, appeared to be in a high state of apprehension lest the loose flannel covering that guards frail mortality upon these occasions should be drawn aside, and discover nature in all her pristine purity and accident that had very nearly happened to myself, when, in endeavoring to turn round quickly, I found the water had disencumbered my frame of the yellow bathing robe, which floated on the surface behind me. One circumstance which made our party more conspicuous was the rejection of the Welsh wigs, which not all the entreaties of the attendant could induce any of the wags to wear. The young ladies disfigure themselves by wearing the black bonnets of the bathing women, but spite of this masquerading in the water, their lovely countenances and soul-subduing eyes create sensations that will be more easily conceived than prudently described. A certain facetious writer, who has published his Walks Through Bath, alluding to this practice, speaks of it as having been prohibited in the 15th century. How long such prohibition, if it ever took place, continued, it is not for me to know. But if the Bath peripatetic historian had made it his business to have seen what he has described, he would have found that the practice of bathing males and females together in Pories Naturalibus was still continued in high perfection, in spite of the Puritans, the Vice Society, or the prohibition of Bishop Beckington, too. To it appears that about the middle of the 15th century it was the custom for males and females to bathe together, in Pories Naturalibus, which was at length prohibited by Bishop Beckington, who ordered, by way of distinction, the wearing of breeches and petticoats. This indecency was suppressed, after considerable difficulty, at the end of the 16th century. Quer, what indecency does our author of the Walks Through Bath mean? The encumbrance of the breeches and petticoats, we must imagine. It also seems that about 1700 it was the fashion for both sexes to bathe together indiscriminately, and the ladies used to decorate their heads with all the advantages of dress, as a mode of attracting attention and heightening their charms. The husband of a lady in one of the baths, in company with Beau Nash, was so much enraptured with the appearance of his wife that he very imprudently observed, "She looked like an angel, and he wished to be with her." Nash immediately seized him by the collar and threw him into the bath. This circumstance produced a duel, and Nash was wounded in his right arm. It, however, had the good effect of establishing the reputation of Nash, who shortly after became master of the ceremonies. 322. You cannot conceive what a number of ladies were washed in the water, the same as our maid is. How the ladies did giggle and set up their clacks all the while an old woman was rubbing their backs. Oh, 'twas pretty to see them all put on their flannels, and then take the water, like so many spaniels, and though all the while it grew hotter and hotter, they swam just as if they were hunting an otter. 'Twas a glorious sight to behold the fair sex, all wading with gentlemen up to their necks, and view them so prettily tumble and sprawl in a great smoking kettle as big as our hall. And today many persons of rank and condition were boiled, by command of an able physician. From the baths we migrated to the grand promenade of fashion, Milsom Street, not forgetting to take a survey of the old Abbey Church, which, as a monument of architectural grandeur without and of dread-monition within, is a building worthy the attention of the antiquarian and the philosopher, while perpetuating the remembrance of many a cherished name to worth, to science, and to virtue dear. The artist and the amateur may derive much gratification from examining the many excellent 323 pieces of sculpture with which the Abbey abounds. But for us, gay in disposition, and scarcely allowing ourselves time for reflection, such a scene had few charms, unless, indeed, the English spy could have separated himself from the buoyant spirits with which he was attended, and then, wrapped in the gloom of the surrounding scene, and given up to serious contemplation, the emblems of mortality which decorate the Gothic pile might have conjured up in his mind's eye the forms of many a departed spirit. Of the blessed shades of long-lost parents and of social friends, of those who, living, lent a luster to the arts, of witty madcaps frostbitten by the sable tyrant death, nipped in the very bud of youth, while yet the sparkling jest was ripe upon the merry lip, and the ruddy glow of health upon the cheek gave earnest of a lengthened life, but soft. Methinks I hear my reader exclaim, "How now, madcap, moralizing Mr. Spy? Art thou, too, bitten by the desire to philosophize, thou, the very spy o' the time, the merry buoyant rogue who has laughed all serious scenes to scorn, and riding over hill and dale and verdant plain upon thy fiery courser, fleet as the winds collecting the cream of comicalities, and beshrew thee, witling, plucking the brightest flowers that bloom in the road of pleasure to give thy merry garlands perfume, and deck thy page withal, art thou growing serious? Then is doomsday near, and poor, deserted, careworn man left unprotected to the tempest's rage. Not so, good reader, we are still the same merry, thoughtless, laughing, buoyant sprite that thou hast known us for the last 2 years. But the archer cannot always keep his bow upon the stretching point. So there are scenes and times and fancies produced by recollective circumstances and objects, which create strange conceits even in the light-hearted bosom of the English spy. Such was the train of reflections which rushed in 324 voluntarily upon my mind as I noted down the passing events of the day. A practice usual with me, when, retiring from the busy hum of men, I seek the retirement of my chamber to commit my thoughts to paper. I had recently passed through the depository, where rest the remains of a tender mother had sought the spot, unnoticed by my light-hearted companions, and having bedewed with tears of gratitude her humble grave, gave vent to my feelings by the following tribute to a parent's worth. My mother's grave. Beneath yon ivy-mantled wall, in a lone corner, where the earth presents a rising green mound, all of her who loved and gave me birth, lies buried deep. No trophied stone or graven verse denotes the spot, her worth her epitaph alone, the greensward grave her humble lot. How silent sleep the virtuous dead! For them few sculptured honors rise, no marble tablet here to spread a fame there, every act implies. No mockery here, nor herald's shield, to glitter o'er a bed of clay, but snowdrops and fresh violets yield a tribute to worth passed away. Tread lightly, ye who love or know life's young road a parent's worth, who yet are strangers to the woe of losing those who gave you birth. 325. who cherished, fondled, fed, and taught from infancy to manhood's pride, directing every opening thought, teaching how reason's power should guide. Ye rich and bold, ye grave and gay, ye mightiest of the sons of men, wealth, honors, fame shall sink away, and all be equalized again. Save what the sculptor may portray, and any tyrant, fool, or knave who has the wealth, may in that way his name from dull oblivion save. That is, he may perpetuate his worthlessness, his frauds and crimes, no matter what his tomb relate, his character lives with the times. Shade of my parent, couldst thou hear the voice of him, thine only child, implore thy loss with filial tear, and deck thy grave with sonnets wild? 'Twould all thy troubles past repay, thy anxious cares, thy hopes and fears, to find as time stole life away, thy memory brightened with his years. Yes, sacred shade. While memory guides this ever wild eccentric brain, while reason holds or virtue chides, still will I pour the filial strain. What, said my old friend Horace Eglantine, after reading this tribute to parental worth, Bernard Blackmantle moralizing. Our spy turned tilde 326 tilde monody maker, writing epitaphs and elegies and odes to spirits that have no corporal substance, when there are so many living subjects yet left for his merrier muse to dwell upon. Come, old fellow, shake off this lethargy of the mind, this vision of past miseries, and prepare for present merriments. The streets begin to fill, the motley throng to see and to be seen, now trip along, some lounge in the bazaars, while others meet to take a turn or two in Milsom Street. Some 8 or 10 round Mervyn's shop remain to stare at those who gladly stare again. In short, my dear fellow, we are all waiting your company to join the swells in Milsom Street, where, I have no doubt, you will find many a star of fashion, whose eccentricities you will think justly entitles him to a niche in your gallery of living characters. Lords of the creation, who, half awake, adorn themselves their daily lounge to take each lordly man his taper waist displays, combs his sweet locks, and laces on his stays, ties on his starched cravat with nicest care, and then steps forth to petrify the fair. Such, for instance, is that roué yonder, the very prince of Bath fops, handsome Jack, whose vanity induces him to assert that his eyebrows are worth 100 per annum to any young fellow in pursuit of a fortune. It should, however, be admitted that his gentlemanly manners and great good nature more than compensate for any little detractions on the score of self-conceit. What the son is, the father was in earlier life, and the old beau is not a little gratified to observe the estimation in which his son is held by the fair sex, on account of his attractive person and still more prepossessing manners. You have heard of Peregrine Hayne's exploits at Birdrop Park, and here comes the proprietor of the tilde 327 tilde place, honest Tom Cally, as jovial a true-hearted English gentleman as ever followed a pack of foxhounds, or gloried in preserving and promoting the old English hospitalities of the table. Circumstances, the result of some hard runs and long odds, have a little impaired the family exchequer. However, the good wishes of all who know him attend him in adversity. But the clouds which have for a time obstructed his sunshine of mirth are fast wearing away, and when he shall return to the enjoyment of his patrimonial acres, he will be sure to meet a joyous welcome from all surrounding him, accompanied with the heartfelt congratulations of those to whom in Bath he is particularly endeared. The smart little fellow driving by in his cabriolet is Beau Burgess, a single star, and one of no mean attraction among the fair spinsters, who can estimate the merits and admire the refulgence of 10,000 sovereign attendant satellites. Bath is, perhaps, now the only place in the kingdom where there is yet to be found a four-in-hand club, a society of gentlemen Jehus, who formerly in London cut no inconsiderable figure in the annals of fashion, and who, according to our mode of estimating the amusements of the gay world, were very unfairly satirized, seeing that with the pursuit of pleasure was combined the additional employment of a large number of mechanics, and a stimulus given not only to the improvement of a noble breed of horses, but to the acquirement of a knowledge, the perfection of which in the metropolis is particularly necessary to the existence of the peripatetic pleasures of His Majesty's subjects. Here we have Colonel Allen, who puts along a good team in very prime style, and having lately been spliced to a good fortune, is a perfect master in the management of the bit. Squire Richards is, also, by no means a contemptible knight of the ribbons, only he sometimes measures tilde 328 tilde his distance a little too closely. A practice, which if he does not improve upon, may some day, in turning a corner, not bring him off right. A follower of the Buxton school, and a true knight of the throng, says old Tom Whipcord in the Annals of Sporting, must not expect to drive 4 high-bred horses well with an opera glass stuck in his right ogle. A bit of good advice that will not only benefit the squire if he attends to it, but perhaps save the lives of 1 or 2 of the Bath pedestrians. The leader of the club, who, by way of distinction from his namesake the colonel, is designated Scotch Allen, is really a noble whip, putting along 4 horses in first-rate style, all brought well up to their work, and running together as close and as regular as the wheels of his carriage. The comical little character upon the strawberry pony is the Bath Adonis, a fine specimen of the Irish antique, illustrated with a beautiful brogue, and emblazoned with a gold coat of arms. The amours of old B.N. Bath would very well fill a volume of themselves. But the anecdote I gave you in the pump-room of little Lacey and her paramour will be sufficient to show you in what estimation he is held by the ladies. "Give me leave to introduce you to a rar fellow," said Hartley. "An old friend of mine, who has all his lifetime been a wholesale dealer in choice spirits, and having now bottled off enough for the remainder of his life, is come to spend the evening of his days in Bath among the bon vivants of the elegant city, enjoying the tit-bits of pleasure, and courting the sweet society of the pretty girls. By heavens, boys, we shall be found out, and you, mister. I will be the ruin of us all, for here comes our old sporting acquaintance, Charles Bannatyne, with his jackal at his heels, accompanied by that mad wag Ormsby, the Cheltenham amateur of fashion, and the gallant little Lieutenant Valumber, who, having formerly made a rich capture of Spanish dollars, is perhaps upon the lookout here tilde 329 tilde for a frigate well laden with English specie, in order to sail in consort, and cruise off the Straits of Independence for life. Well, success attend him, said Hartley, for he well deserves a good word whether at sea or on shore. The military-looking gentleman yonder, who is in close conversation with that rough diamond, Ellis, once a London attorney, is the highly respected Colonel Fitzgerald, whom our friend Transit formerly caricatured under the cognomen of Colonel Saunter, a good-humored joke with which he is by no means displeased himself. But, my dear fellows, said Transit, if we remain fixed to this spot much longer, we shall have the eyes of all the beaux monde upon us, and stand a chance of being pointed at for the rest of the time that we remain in Bath. A piece of advice that was not wholly unnecessary, for being personally known to a few of the sporting characters, our visit to the elegant city had spread like wildfire, and on our appearance in Milsom Street, a very general desire was expressed by the beaux to have a sight of the English spy and his friend Transit, by whose joint labors they anticipated they might hereafter live to fame. One of the most remarkable personages of the old school still left to Bath is the celebrated Captain Matthews, the author of a short treatise on whist, and the same gentleman who, at an early period of life, contested with the late R.B. Sheridan upon Lansdowne for the fair hand of the beauteous Miss Lindley, the lady to whom the wit was afterwards married. In this way did my pleasant friends Hartley and Eglantine continue to furnish me with brief notices of the most attractive of the stars of fashion, who usually lounge away the mornings in Milsom Street, exchanging the familiar nod and "how d'ye do?" and holding sweet discourse among their fragrant selves upon the pursuits of the haute classe, the merits of the last new novel, or the fortune of the last unmarried feminine tilde 330 tilde or rival. To these may be added reminiscences of the last night's card table and remarks upon the balls at the rooms. For 2 musical parties to Bladud belong, to delight the old rooms and the upper. One gives to the ladies a supper, no song, and the other a song and no supper. The jolly dame to the right, said Horace, is the mother of England's best friend, the secretary for the Foreign Department, George Canning, a man to whom we are all indebted for the amalgamation of party, and the salvation of the country, the clerical who follows immediately behind Mrs. Hun is a reverend gentleman whose daughters both recently eloped from his house on the same morning, attended by favored lovers to bind with sacred wreaths their happy destinies at the shrine of Hymen. We had now reached the bottom of the street again, after having made at least a dozen promenades to and fro, and were on the point of retiring to our hotel to dress for dinner, when Hartley directed my attention to a dashing row, who, dressed in the extreme of superlative style, was accompanied by a beautiful piece of fair simplicity in the garb of a Puritan. "That," said my friend, "is the beautiful Miss D** T1 of the faithful, whom the dashing Count L** C** T has recently induced to say I for life, thus gaining a double prize of no mean importance by one stroke of good luck, a fine girl and a fine fortune into the bargain. I must not forget our friend the consulting surgeon H***, KS, or omit to notice that in Bath the faculty are all distinguished by some peculiar title of this sort, as the digestive physician, the practical apothecary, and the operative chemist. A piece of quackery not very creditable to their acknowledged skill and general respectability. At dinner we were again joined by our facetious 331 friend Blackstrap, who, to use his own phraseology, having made a good morning's work of it, hoped he might be permitted to make one among us, a request with which we were most willing to comply. In the evening, after the bottle had circulated freely, some of our party proposed a visit to the theatre, but as Bath theatricals could not be expected to afford much amusement to London frequenters of the Theatres Royal, Transit suggested our sallying forth for a spree. "For," said he, "I have not yet booked a bit of true life since I have been in Bath. The pump room, the bathers, and the swells in Milsom Street are all very well for the lovers of elegant life, but our sporting friends and old college chums will expect to see a genuine touch or two of the broad humor of Bath, something suburban and funny. Cannot you introduce us to anything pleasant of this sort?" said Transit, addressing Blackstrap. "Perhaps give us a sight of the interior of a snug convent, or show us where the Bath wonderfuls resort to carouse and sing away their cares." "It is some years since," said Blackstrap, "that in the company of a few merry wags, I paid a visit to the Buff Club in Avon Street. But as you, gentlemen, appear disposed for a little fun, if you will pledge yourselves to be directed by me, I will undertake to introduce you to a scene far exceeding in profligacy and dissipation the most florid picture which our friend Transit has yet furnished of the back settlements in the Holy Land." With this understanding, and with no little degree of anticipatory pleasure, did our merry group set forth to take a survey of the interior of the long room at the Pig and Whistle in Avon Street. Of the origin of this sign, Blackstrap gave us a very humorous anecdote. The house was formerly, it would appear, known by the sign of the Crown and Thistle, and was at that time the resort of the Irish traders who visited Bath to dispose of their linens. One of these emeralders 332 having lost his way, and being unable to recollect either the name of the street or the sign of his inn, thus addressed a countryman whom he accidentally met. "Sure, I've quite forgotten the sign of my inn." "Be after mentioning something like it, my jewel," said his friend. "Sure, it's very like the Pig and Whistle," replied the inquirer. "By the powers, so it is, the Crown and Thistle, you mean." And from this mistake of the emeralder, the house has ever since been so designated. Upon our visit to this scene of uproarious mirth, we found it frequented by the lowest and most depraved characters in society, the mendicants and miserable of the female sex, who, lost to every sense of shame or decency, assemble here to indulge in profligacies, the full description of which must not stain the pages of the English Spy. As a scene of low life, my friend Transit has done it ample justice. Where the portraits of Lady Grosvenor as one of the Cyprian frequenters is designated, the Toad in a Hole and Lucy the Fair will be easily recognized. A gallon of gin for the ladies, and a liberal distribution of beer and tobacco for the males, made us very welcome guests, and ensured us, during our short stay, at least from personal interruption. It may be asked why such a house is licensed by the magistracy. But when it is known that characters of this sort will always be found in well-populated places, and that the doors are regularly closed at 11 o'clock, it is perhaps thought to be a measure of prudence to let them continue to assemble in an obscure part of the suburbs, where they congregate together under the vigilant eye of the police, instead of being driven abroad to seek fresh places of resort, and by this means increase the evils of society. The next morning saw my friend Transit and myself again, prepared to separate from our friends Hartley and Eglantine, on our way to Worcester, tilde 333 tilde tilde, where we had promised to pay a visit to Old Crony on our road back to London. Reader, if our sketches in Bath are somewhat brief, remember we are ever on the wing in search of novelty, and are not disposed to stay one day longer in any place than it affords fresh food for pen and pencil in the characters we have sketched. We disclaim any thought of personal offense. Eccentrics are public property, and must not object to appear in print, seeing that they are in the journey through life allowed to ride a free horse, without that curb which generally restrains the conduct of others. But I must here take my farewell of the elegant city of that attractive spot of which Bailey justly sings. In this auspicious region all mankind, whate'er their taste, congenial joys may find. Here moneyed men may pass for men of worth, and wealthy cits may hide plebeian birth. Here men devoid of cash may live with ease, appear genteel, and pass for what they please.